The night she was abandoned was quiet, too quiet for a child to understand what was happening. The road was empty, stretching far into the darkness, with no streetlights and no houses nearby. The car slowed down, then stopped. The man in the front seat did not turn around. He did not say goodbye. He did not say her name. He only opened the door and told her to get out. She was still holding a small cloth bag, the only thing she had been allowed to take. Inside it were a worn sweater, a pair of sandals that were too small, and a picture she had hidden without anyone noticing. The air was cold, and the ground felt hard under her feet. Before she could ask anything, the door slammed shut. The car drove away, its red lights disappearing into the dark like they were never there. She stood there for a long time, not crying at first, not moving either. Her mind could not accept what had just happened. She thought the car would come back. She believed someone would turn around and call her back inside, but the road stayed silent. The wind brushed past her face. The night went on. She was young, far too young to understand why her father had done this. All she knew was that he was rich, powerful, and respected by many. People spoke his name with pride and fear. He lived in a big house with high walls and guards at the gate. She had lived there too, but never felt like she belonged. She was always kept away, told to stay quiet, told not to be seen. That night she waited until her legs began to shake. Fear slowly filled her chest. The dark felt bigger now, louder. Strange sounds came from the bushes nearby. She hugged her cloth bag tightly and began to walk, not knowing where she was going. Every step felt heavy. Her shoes slipped on the loose gravel. She tripped and fell, scraping her knee. The pain finally broke her silence, and she cried out softly. She tried to stand, but her knee hurt badly. Blood soaked into her pants. She sat down on the ground, tired and weak. Her crying grew louder, echoing into the empty night. She called out for help, but no one answered. The road felt endless, and hope slowly slipped away. After some time, her voice grew hoarse. Her body felt cold. She wrapped her arms around herself, shaking. Her eyes grew heavy, but fear kept her awake. She did not know how long she sat there. Minutes felt like hours. Then she heard something. It was a soft sound at first. A slow step. Then another. She lifted her head, her heart pounding fast. Out of the darkness came a shape moving carefully toward her. She felt a sudden wave of fear and tried to crawl back, but her knee stopped her. Tears filled her eyes again. The shape came closer, and she could finally see it. It was a dog. A dirty, thin dog with rough fur and tired eyes. One ear was bent, and its tail moved slowly, unsure. It stopped a few steps away from her and watched her quietly. She did not scream. She did not run. She was too tired for that. She only looked at the dog, breathing fast. The dog sat down, keeping its distance. Its eyes were gentle, not threatening. It tilted its head slightly, as if trying to understand her. She whispered, her voice shaking, telling the dog not to hurt her. The dog did not move. It only stayed there, calm and steady. Slowly, she reached into her cloth bag and pulled out a small piece of bread she had saved. Her hand trembled as she held it out. The dog stood up carefully and stepped closer. It sniffed the bread, then looked at her face. After a moment, it gently took the bread from her hand. It ate slowly, never taking its eyes off her. When it finished, it sat back down again, as if waiting. For the first time that night, she felt something change inside her. The fear did not disappear, but it softened. She was no longer completely alone. The dog moved closer and lay down near her feet, its body warm against the cold ground. She felt its steady breathing. Her eyes finally closed. Exhaustion took over. She slept sitting up, leaning against a small rock, while the dog stayed awake. It listened to every sound, alert and watchful. When something moved in the bushes, it lifted its head. When the wind blew harder, it shifted closer to her. At dawn, the sky slowly turned pale. The girl woke up feeling stiff and sore. Her knees still hurt, but the bleeding had stopped. She looked around, confused for a moment, then remembered everything. Tears filled her eyes again. But then she noticed the dog was still there. The dog stood up and wagged its tail gently when it saw her awake. It seemed happy, like it had been waiting for this moment. She reached out and touched its fur. It was rough, but warm. The dog did not pull away. She tried to stand, but her knee gave way. She cried out in pain and fell back down. The dog barked softly, not loudly, but with concern. It circled her, then walked a few steps away and looked back, as if asking her to follow. She did not understand at first. The dog repeated the action, walking a little farther this time, then stopping and looking back again. Slowly, she realized the dog was trying to lead her somewhere, using a stick she found nearby. She pushed herself up and began to walk, leaning heavily on her good leg. The dog stayed close, never leaving her side. When she slowed down, it slowed too. When she stopped to rest, it sat beside her. They walked for a long time. The road turned into a narrow path. Trees surrounded them, blocking out the sun. Her legs felt weak, and her stomach ached from hunger. Several times she thought she could not go on. Each time, the dog nudged her gently, as if telling her not to give up. Finally, they reached a small, old house hidden among the trees. It looked worn and forgotten, with a broken fence and faded walls. Smoke rose from a small chimney. The dog barked this time, louder than before. An elderly woman stepped outside, holding a walking stick. Her face was lined with age, and her clothes were simple. When she saw the girl, her eyes widened with shock. She hurried forward as fast as she could. The girl collapsed before she could say a word. The dog stayed beside her, barking again until the woman knelt down and checked the child's breathing. The woman lifted the girl carefully and carried her inside. The house was small, but warm. The woman cleaned the girl's knee, wrapped it with cloth, and gave her water to drink. The girl woke up later, lying on a simple bed. The dog lay on the floor next to her, resting its head near her hand. The woman asked questions gently, but the girl could not answer much. Her voice was weak, and her memories felt heavy. She only said that she had nowhere to go. The woman did not ask more. She only nodded and said the girl could stay for now. She gave her soup and covered her with a blanket. The dog stayed close, as if guarding her. Outside, the world moved on, unaware of what had happened on that quiet road. Far away, the billionaire returned to his life of comfort and power, believing the past had been erased. But in that small house, hidden among trees, a new story had begun. A girl who had been left behind was still alive. And the reason was a dog who refused to walk away. The days that followed were unlike anything the girl had ever experienced. The small house tucked between the trees became her world. And the elderly woman who had taken her and treated her with kindness she had never known before. She was given a small corner in the room that smelled faintly of herbs and old wood, a soft blanket to sleep on, and meals that, though simple, were always warm and filling. The first time she sat at the table, her hands shook as she picked up the spoon. She had gone so long without a proper meal that she almost forgot how to eat. But the woman's gentle presence made her feel safe enough to try. The dog never left her side. It had found a spot near her bed at night and would only leave to fetch water from the small creek nearby, or to chase off stray animals that dared come too close. The girl named the dog only in her heart because she knew words were not important. Its presence spoke louder than anything could. Every time she felt afraid, the dog would nuzzle her hand or press its body against her legs, as if telling her that she was not alone. Slowly, she began to trust the world again. One small gesture at a time, the elderly woman, who had once lived alone, welcomed the new rhythm of having another life in the house. She showed the girl how to gather vegetables from the garden, how to start a small fire safely, and how to make the water from the creek safe to drink. At first, everything felt strange. She had never done these things before. In the luxurious home she had once known, people had done everything for her. But here she had to learn, and though it was hard, the challenge became a source of pride. Sometimes she would watch the dog play in the small yard. Its fur was still rough, and its paws muddy from running around, but its energy was endless. It chased leaves, barked at birds, and rolled around in the sunlight. Seeing it happy made her smile for the first time in a long time. She realized that life could still have small joys, even when everything else seemed lost. The dog had given her a reason to keep moving, a reason to survive. The days passed, and with each one, her body grew stronger. She learned to climb small hills behind the house, to gather wood for the fire, and to help in preparing meals. The elderly woman watched her with quiet pride, often saying, "You are stronger than you know. Never forget that." The girl repeated these words to herself, even when fear crept back into her mind, whispering that she was nothing, that she had no place in the world. The dog was always nearby, acting as both protector and companion. It seemed to understand her moods perfectly. When she was sad or frustrated, it would lay its head on her lap. When she was scared, it would stand in front of her, ears perked and tail stiff, ready to defend. Its loyalty amazed her. She had never known anyone who cared for her so completely, without asking for anything in return. For the first time, she felt what it meant to be loved unconditionally. One morning, she woke to find the dog gone from its usual spot. Panic rose in her chest. She ran outside and found it sitting at the edge of the garden, staring intently at something. As she approached, she saw a small rabbit caught in a trap. The dog had been trying to protect her from danger again, even when it could not explain what it knew. She freed the rabbit, and from that day, she began to understand that the dog's presence was more than comfort. It was guidance, teaching her to notice the world around her and to act with care. Life in the small house was not always easy. There were days when the wind howled through the cracks in the walls, when rain flooded the small paths, and when hunger gnawed at her stomach before the elderly woman could find enough food. But the girl faced each day with determination. She learned to gather berries, to catch fish from the creek, and to collect firewood efficiently. The dog followed her on every trip, sometimes bounding ahead, sometimes pacing beside her, always alert to any threat. Together, they formed a small, unbreakable team. In the evenings after their work was done, they would sit by the fire. The girl would warm her hands, and the dog would curl up beside her. She began to talk to it, telling it stories from the life she had lost, from the home she had been abandoned in, and from the people who had treated her as if she were invisible. The dog listened, tilting its head as if understanding every word. In return, it offered silent comfort, reminding her that she was not forgotten, that someone cared. Over time, the girl began to feel something she had never known before: hope. It was not loud or grand, but quiet and persistent, like the flicker of a candle in a dark room. She started to dream of a life beyond the small house, a life where she could help others, where she could be strong on her own. The dog's loyalty had given her the courage to imagine a future she had not dared to consider before. One particularly cold morning, she woke to find a small note left by the elderly woman. It said simply, "You are capable of more than you think. Trust yourself, as I trust you." She held the note close and felt tears prick her eyes. The words were simple, but they carried weight. She realized that she had been given a second chance at life, and it was up to her to make the most of it. The dog remained her constant companion. It taught her patience, the importance of observing the world, and the joy of small victories. When she learned to fish, it would watch, wagging its tail in excitement when she caught something. When she successfully built a small shelter near the creek, it would circle around her, sniffing and approving silently. Every action, no matter how small, was a lesson in resilience and hope. As months turned into years, the bond between the girl and the dog grew stronger. She no longer felt like a helpless child. She could climb trees, gather food, and even care for the dog when it fell ill. She realized that strength was not about wealth or power. It was about survival, courage, and loyalty. And the dog had been her first teacher, her first true friend. The elderly woman noticed the change as well. She would often say, "You are becoming someone remarkable. Never let the world tell you otherwise." The girl repeated the words in her mind, feeling a quiet determination grow inside her. The pain of abandonment still lingered, but it no longer defined her. She had found love, trust, and purpose in the small house between the trees. The dog, ever watchful, remained a reminder of her past and a guide to her future. Its presence was a living proof that even in the darkest moments, someone or something could care for you unconditionally. It had saved her not just from the night she was left alone, but from despair itself. She began to understand that survival was not just about escaping danger. It was about forming bonds, learning lessons, and finding meaning in life. She started to explore beyond the house and garden, venturing into the surrounding woods. The dog accompanied her, sometimes running ahead, sometimes pacing beside her, always alert. She learned to identify edible plants, to track animals, and to understand the patterns of the forest. Every step, every discovery made her feel more confident, more capable, and more alive. Though the world outside was unknown and unpredictable, the girl no longer felt fear the way she once had. She knew that with courage, patience, and loyalty, she could face challenges and overcome them. And at her side, the dog remained a constant reminder that even when life seems cruel and lonely, there is always hope and love to be found, even in the most unexpected forms. The years passed, and the girl grew taller, stronger, and more determined with each day. Life in the small house had taught her lessons no school could ever offer. She had learned to survive, to care for herself and others, and to value the little joys hidden in everyday life. Her bond with the dog, still her loyal companion, had never weakened. Together, they had become inseparable. A team that faced the world with quiet courage. Despite the simplicity of her surroundings, she began to dream of more. She remembered the life she had been forced to leave behind, the wealth and comfort she had never truly belonged to, and the father who had abandoned her without a second thought. Those memories no longer brought despair, but fueled a quiet fire within her. She wanted to learn, to grow, to prove that she was capable of more than anyone, even her father, had ever believed. Schooling had been impossible when she first arrived at the small house. There were no teachers nearby, and she was too young and fragile to travel to the town. But as she grew, she found ways to educate herself. The elderly woman had a few books left from her younger days, worn and faded but full of stories and knowledge. She read every one, teaching herself to write, to calculate, and to understand the world outside the forest. The dog lay nearby during her lessons, as if guarding her focus, its eyes always watching, always protective. Sometimes she would climb to the top of the small hill behind the house, sitting in the sunlight and imagining what life could be beyond the trees. She thought of the busy streets, of the lights and sounds, and even of her father's mansion, which now seemed like a distant dream she might one day reclaim. The idea of returning to that world terrified her, but it also motivated her. She wanted to step into it as someone different, stronger, wiser, and unafraid. With time, she found ways to make money in small ways. She helped villagers in nearby settlements, trading vegetables she grew, helping with chores, or carrying goods. The dog accompanied her, running ahead to alert her to danger or to warn of strangers. The girl learned to negotiate, to plan, and to manage what little resources she had. Each small success brought a sense of pride that filled her heart. She realized she could shape her own future step by step, no matter how small the beginnings. The elderly woman often reminded her, "You have more strength than you know. Use it wisely, and never let anyone take it away." These words echoed in her mind every day. She knew life had been unfair to her, but she also knew that the unfairness could not define her. She had survived what many would not, and now she had a chance to rise above it. Her dreams were no longer just wishes, they were goals she was willing to fight for. Her education expanded as she grew older. She discovered books about science, history, and business. Borrowing old magazines and newspapers whenever she could find them in the small village nearby, she learned about how the world worked, about money, power, and influence. Every lesson was a reminder that she could no longer remain hidden in the forest. She needed to step into the larger world. To claim the life she had been denied, the dog remained her constant companion through every step. It had grown older as well, its fur turning gray in some places, but its loyalty never wavered. On cold nights, it would curl up beside her, keeping her warm. On long journeys to gather resources, it ran ahead, scouting and protecting. It had been there from the moment she had been abandoned, and she knew that part of her strength came from knowing she was never truly alone. One day, while helping in the village, she met a kind teacher who recognized her intelligence and determination. This teacher offered to help her continue her education formally, providing guidance and access to learning materials she had never known existed. She eagerly accepted, studying day and night, always pushing herself to learn more. She knew that knowledge would be her tool, her weapon, her shield in the world she planned to enter. The teacher often marveled at her determination. "You are remarkable," the teacher would say. "I have never seen a student so dedicated and resilient." The girl smiled quietly, thinking of the dog waiting outside and the elderly woman who had nurtured her. She knew that she owed much of her resilience to them, to the love and guidance they had given her when the world had been cruel. As she entered her teenage years, she began to see changes in herself beyond knowledge and skills. She grew confident, her posture straight, her voice firm. She learned to stand her ground, to make decisions, and to trust her instincts. Life had taught her to be cautious, but it had also taught her to be brave. She had faced abandonment, hunger, and loneliness, and she had survived. That survival had built a foundation stronger than any wealth or privilege could provide. With confidence came opportunities. She started tutoring younger children in the village, sharing the knowledge she had gained. She helped the elderly with chores, learned carpentry, even repaired small tools for people who could not afford new ones. Each act of service brought her recognition and respect. She realized that power did not only come from wealth, it also came from the ability to help, to teach, and to inspire others. The dog remained by her side through every endeavor. Even as she grew more independent, the bond they shared only strengthened. It had been her first friend, her protector, and her guide. She often thought that the dog understood her in ways no human ever could. Its loyalty reminded her that even in a world full of betrayal and abandonment, true devotion existed, and it was worth cherishing. Despite her growth, she never forgot the past. Memories of her father's betrayal lingered, but they no longer brought pain alone. They also brought determination. She promised herself that she would one day confront the world that had rejected her. Not with anger or vengeance, but with strength and dignity. She would show that abandonment could not define her, that she could rise from nothing to achieve greatness. Her teenage years were marked by learning, self-discovery, and preparation for the world beyond the forest. She learned to manage money, plan for the future, and set realistic goals. She began to dream bigger, imagining a life where she could influence her destiny and help others like her. She realized that her journey was no longer just about survival. It was about building a meaningful life. A life where she could finally belong by the time she reached adulthood. She had grown into a young woman full of knowledge, strength, and determination. Her body was fit, her mind sharp, and her heart resilient. She had survived abandonment, hunger, and loneliness. She had learned to navigate the world with intelligence and courage. And through it all, the dog remained her constant companion, a living reminder of the loyalty and love that had first saved her life. She knew the day would come when she would have to leave the forest. To step into the wider world she had prepared herself for, she felt ready. She had learned skills, built confidence, and cultivated resilience. She had grown from a helpless child into a strong young woman. And when that day came, she would be ready to face the challenges ahead. Guided by the lessons of her past and the loyalty of her faithful companion, in the quiet moments, she often looked at the dog, sitting faithfully by her side, and whispered her gratitude. It had been her first teacher, her protector, and her friend. Its presence had given her courage, its loyalty had given her hope, and its love had given her strength. She knew that no matter what the future held, she would never forget the lessons learned in that small house, and she would carry them forward, stronger and wiser than ever before. The first time she returned to the city, it felt both familiar and strange. The streets were filled with lights, cars honking, and people rushing by, all moving at a pace she had never experienced in the quiet of the forest. She held her head high, walking confidently, though her heart beat faster with every step. This was the city where she had been abandoned, where her father lived, where the life she had been denied still existed. She had imagined this moment for years, and now it was here. She wore simple clothes, nothing extravagant, but she carried herself with a quiet confidence. She no longer felt the fear that had haunted her as a child. She had learned to trust herself, to rely on her intelligence and her skills. The dog, now older but still alert, walked beside her, occasionally sniffing the air and alerting her to sounds she might not have noticed. Its presence reminded her of the journey that had brought her here, of the strength she now carried. The city was a blur of movement and noise, but she had planned carefully. She had researched her father's businesses, the streets he frequented, and the people he trusted. Every step she took was deliberate. She observed quietly, listening to conversations, noting patterns, and understanding the world she had been forced to leave behind. This knowledge gave her power and calm. She was no longer a child at the mercy of others. She was a young woman with purpose. Her first encounter with someone from her father's world was unintentional. She helped an elderly shopkeeper in the market, carrying boxes and arranging goods with precision. The shopkeeper, grateful for her help, offered her a small cup of tea. As she sipped, she overheard a conversation between two men discussing a wealthy man's latest investments. She recognized the man's name immediately, her father's name. Her heart tightened, but she kept her composure. She listened quietly, absorbing every detail. She learned about the new projects her father was involved in, the people who worked for him, and the places he frequented. She realized that he had built an empire far beyond what she remembered. And yet, he had left her behind without a second thought. This knowledge fueled her determination even more. Days turned into weeks as she navigated the city, blending in while observing. She used her skills and intelligence to create opportunities for herself. Taking small jobs that allowed her to interact with influential people, she studied their behavior, learned their routines, and gradually built a network that could support her goals. The city was no longer intimidating. It was a challenge she was ready to meet. One evening, she attended a social event where her father was present. She did not approach him directly. Instead, she watched from a distance, noting his mannerisms, the way people spoke to him, and how he controlled the room. He seemed larger than life, commanding attention effortlessly. Yet, there was a coldness in his eyes, a distance that had been a part of her memories. She felt a mixture of anger and resolve. She had come not to beg for recognition, but to prove her worth. Her father did not recognize her at first. She had changed too much, matured beyond the child he had abandoned. She approached conversations with poise, speaking with clarity and intelligence. People listened, respected her opinions, and sought her advice. She realized that influence came not from wealth alone, but from respect and the ability to think clearly under pressure. This understanding gave her confidence that she could stand in the same room as her father and not feel small. In the following days, she strategically positioned herself in places her father frequented. She offered insights on business matters in subtle ways, catching the attention of his associates. They began to notice her talent, her determination, and her unique perspective. Slowly, she became a person of interest within the circles that once excluded her. Her presence was felt quietly, but powerfully, as if she were planting seeds that would one day grow into recognition and respect. The dog remained at her side through every encounter. In the bustling city, it was her grounding force, a reminder of where she had come from and the loyalty that had guided her. It moved confidently with her, never faltering, alerting her to danger or opportunity. People noticed the dog as well, sensing the quiet authority and companionship it shared with her. Together, they were a unit, inseparable and strong. One afternoon, she finally crossed paths with her father directly. He did not recognize her, and she did not reveal herself immediately. She spoke with calm authority, presenting ideas and suggestions that impressed those around her. He listened, intrigued by her insight, unaware that the young woman standing before him was his abandoned daughter. She felt a strange mix of emotions, anger, sorrow, and satisfaction. She was no longer the child he had discarded. She was someone he could no longer ignore. Over time, she orchestrated subtle encounters that allowed her father to observe her capabilities without realizing her identity. She noticed his reactions, the flickers of curiosity and respect, and she allowed herself small moments of quiet satisfaction. The power dynamic had shifted. She was no longer powerless. She had grown, learned, and prepared herself to confront the world on her own terms. Despite the careful planning and strategy, she never lost her compassion or her humanity. She helped those in need quietly, aided people without seeking recognition, and treated everyone with respect. Her father, on the other hand, remained distant and focused on power and wealth. She realized that she had not returned for revenge, but to prove that strength and dignity were not given, they were earned, as weeks turned into months. She became a figure of quiet influence. People began to seek her advice, value her opinion, and notice her presence. She had created a life for herself in the city, one built on intelligence, resilience, and determination. Her father remained unaware of her true identity, yet she had already begun to show him the consequences of abandoning someone capable, someone strong, someone he could not ignore forever. In the quiet moments of the night, she would walk with the dog along the rooftops or deserted streets, reflecting on her journey. The city was vast and intimidating, yet it now felt like a place where she belonged. She thought of the small house in the forest, the elderly woman who had nurtured her, and the dog who had saved her life. They had taught her lessons of loyalty, perseverance, and courage that no city could erase. Finally, she understood that the return was not merely about confronting her father, it was about reclaiming her life. She had taken control of her destiny, built a path with her own hands, and proven to herself that abandonment did not define her. She had become someone powerful, not through wealth alone, but through knowledge, resilience, and integrity. Her father's recognition was not necessary for her worth. She had already risen above the pain of the past. Her return to the city marked a new chapter. She was no longer the abandoned child. She was a young woman of strength and vision. The dog remained her loyal companion, a reminder of the journey from helplessness to empowerment. Together, they moved through the world with quiet confidence, prepared for the next steps of the life she had fought to reclaim. Every interaction, every choice, was a testament to her resilience and the lessons she had learned along the way in this city. Among the bustling streets and glittering buildings, she had found her place, not because of her father, not because of wealth or power, but because she had chosen to rise. She had faced abandonment, fear, and loneliness, and she had grown stronger than ever. The dog, faithful to the very end, had been her guide and protector, reminding her that love and loyalty could be found even in the darkest moments. And as she continued to navigate the city, she knew that the final chapter of her journey, the confrontation with her father, and the full reclaiming of her identity was approaching. And she would face it with courage, dignity, and strength. The day finally came when she decided it was time to reveal the truth. Years of careful planning, learning, and preparation had led to this moment. She was no longer the frightened child who had been left alone in the night. She was a strong, intelligent young woman, capable of standing on her own. The dog, now older, but still alert and faithful, walked beside her, a constant reminder of the loyalty that had first saved her life. She entered her father's office building with confidence. Walking past guards who barely noticed her presence, she had dressed simply, without jewelry or extravagance, knowing that her presence alone would command attention when she spoke with purpose. She carried herself with dignity, each step measured, each gesture calm. She was here to reclaim not just recognition, but the respect and identity that had been denied to her for so long. Her father was in a meeting when she arrived. He looked older than she remembered, his face lined with stress and the weight of responsibilities. He had built an empire, but it had come at the cost of personal connections, and perhaps even at the cost of morality. He did not recognize her at first, and she allowed that to remain, observing him quietly while he spoke to his associates. After the meeting, she asked to speak with him privately. Surprised, he agreed, curious about the young woman requesting his time. She walked into the office, the dog waiting outside, and took a seat opposite him. She let the moment stretch, letting him notice the poise, intelligence, and confidence that radiated from her. He studied her closely, sensing something familiar yet unplaceable. Finally, she spoke. She told him who she was, recounting the night she had been abandoned and the years of survival that had followed. She described the small house in the forest, the elderly woman who had cared for her, and the dog who had saved her life. She spoke calmly, but firmly, leaving no room for denial or argument. Her voice carried both the pain of the past and the strength she had gained since. Her father's face went pale. He opened his mouth to speak but found no words. The empire he had built, the wealth he had accumulated, meant nothing in that moment. The child he had discarded was now a young woman of remarkable strength and dignity. He realized that his actions had consequences that could not be erased. She continued, explaining how she had used her intelligence, determination, and resilience to build a life for herself. She had educated herself, helped others, and grown into someone respected and admired. She had returned not for revenge, but to show that abandonment could not define her, that she had risen above the pain and betrayal. Her words were measured, yet filled with undeniable power. The dog waited outside the office, its ears perked and eyes watchful. It had been there through every step of her journey, a silent witness to her growth and determination. Its presence reminded both her and her father of the loyalty and love that had shaped her life. She told him that this loyalty and love, not wealth or power, had saved her and made her who she was. Her father tried to respond, but his voice faltered. He attempted to explain, to justify his past actions, but she listened without anger. She was no longer seeking his approval or pity. She was simply asserting her truth and reclaiming her place in the world. The conversation was not about reconciliation yet. It was about recognition, acknowledgement, the power of resilience. Over the next weeks, she worked to reclaim what had been denied to her. She did not seek to destroy her father or take revenge. Instead, she used her knowledge, influence, and skills to establish her position within the business and social circles he had controlled. People began to see her as a force to be reckoned with, someone intelligent, capable, and fair-minded. Her father, though still powerful, could no longer ignore her presence or influence. She also made a point to help others quietly, those who had been abandoned, overlooked, or underestimated. Her actions demonstrated that true strength was not measured by wealth alone, but by the ability to rise above adversity and use one's experiences to create positive change. Each act of kindness, each decision guided by integrity, strengthened her reputation and solidified her independence. The dog remained by her side through every challenge. It had grown older, its movements slower, but its loyalty never wavered. In quiet moments, she would sit beside it, stroking its fur, feeling a connection that transcended words. It had been her protector, guide, and companion. A reminder that love and loyalty were more powerful than fear or betrayal. One day, she confronted her father again, this time in the presence of others who could witness the truth. She laid out the evidence of her abandonment, the years she had spent surviving and growing stronger, and the lessons she had learned. She spoke of resilience, dignity, and the importance of loyalty and compassion. The room was silent as she finished, and her father had no words left to defend himself. His empire, his wealth, and his power could not erase the truth she had spoken. Her father, finally confronted with the consequences of his actions, could only acknowledge her strength. He realized that the child he had abandoned had grown into a remarkable young woman, capable of commanding respect and influence on her own terms. He understood that wealth and power were meaningless without integrity, love, and loyalty, the very qualities he had failed to provide her. With her father's acknowledgement, she did not seek vengeance. Instead, she chose dignity, walking away with the knowledge that she had reclaimed her identity, her strength, and her life. She had proven that abandonment did not define her, that she could rise above any challenge, and that true power came from resilience, intelligence, compassion. Her return to the world was complete. She had faced the man who had abandoned her, claimed her place with strength and dignity, and built a life that reflected her true potential. The city, once intimidating, had become a landscape of opportunity, respect, and accomplishment. The dog, still faithful and watchful, remained her companion, a living reminder of the journey that had brought her from helplessness to empowerment in quiet moments. She would reflect on the journey the nights spent alone in the forest, the lessons learned from the elderly woman, the guidance and loyalty of the dog, and the growth that had shaped her into someone remarkable. She understood that her strength had been forged through hardship, resilience, and unwavering determination. Her past could not hold her back. It had been the foundation for her future. She had reclaimed her life not by taking revenge, but by rising above the pain, embracing her abilities, and showing the world the power of determination and loyalty. Her story became an example for others, a testament that even in the darkest moments one could find strength, hope, and a path to greatness. The dog, older and slower now, lay beside her as she looked out over the city she had reclaimed. Its eyes held the same loyalty and understanding that had guided her all these years. She reached down, stroking its fur, and whispered words of gratitude. It had been her first teacher, her protector, and her friend. Through its love and loyalty, she had learned the most important lesson of all, that true strength comes not from wealth or power, but from perseverance, compassion, and the bonds we nurture along the way. The billionaire father, once indifferent and dismissive, had finally seen the consequences of his actions. But she did not need his approval to feel complete. She had earned her place in the world, not through inheritance, but through resilience, intelligence, and integrity. Her journey had been long and difficult, but it had forged a young woman capable of facing any challenge. Her story ended not with anger or bitterness, but with strength, dignity, and the recognition of her own worth. She had been abandoned, yet she had risen. She had been alone, yet she had formed bonds stronger than any wealth. She had been underestimated, yet she had become someone the world could not ignore. And through it all, the dog remained by her side. It's a symbol of loyalty, love, and the quiet courage that had guided her from the night she was left alone to the moment she reclaimed her life.